I'll recognize Mr. Thomas 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Pitts, Congressman Green, and members of the subcommittee. Today I speak on behalf of the consumer-led coalition called the Coalition to Preserve Rehabilitation, or the CPR Coalition. It's about 30 rehabilitation and disability organizations, and it's run by a steering committee of the Center for Medicare Advocacy, the Brain Injury Association of America, the United Spinal Association, the National Multiple Sclerosis Association, and the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. My testimony today focuses on post-acute care and the importance of preserving access to rehabilitation, timely, intensive, and coordinated rehabilitation care in the context of site-neutral payment proposals and bundling proposals. First, a word about the importance of rehabilitation. The Coalition believes that rehabilitation is truly the linchpin to improving health, function, and independence of Medicare beneficiaries after an illness or an injury, a disability, or a chronic condition. But these settings are not all the same, and in fact, their outcomes, the outcomes in these different settings are quite different, and I'm happy to say that we're beginning to get new data that actually demonstrates this, rather than just the intuitive sense that that's the case. Just a quick personal word. Like many Americans, I have personal experience with rehabilitation. When I was 10 years old, I spent about 2.5 months in a rehabilitation hospital, Craig Rehab Hospital in Denver, Colorado, following a car accident where I lost my legs below the knees, and proceeded to have a goal of walking into my 5th grade class, which I did, and since then have used 13 different sets of artificial limbs over the past 40 years, and have had a real front row seat in what good rehabilitation and a program and what good prosthetic care really means. All Medicare beneficiaries should have the same access that I did to that care. Under Medicare PAC reform proposals, both site neutrality and bundling, all Medicare patients should have access to the right level of intensity coordination of rehabilitation in the right setting and at the right time and on a timely basis. And of course, that's easier said than done. We believe that any legislative changes to the post-acute care environment on these issues should not have the effect of restricting access to rehabilitation care and should avoid proposals that will lead to a reduction in Medicare rehab benefits or that erect policy barriers that will affect beneficiaries by essentially channeling them into settings of care that are less than what they need in terms of their individual or medical rehab benefits. In terms of the SNF IRF site-neutral payment proposal that has been proposed in the last few budgets from the President as well as MedPAC, the Coalition opposes this proposal. We believe this is little more than an outright financial disincentive for inpatient rehab hospitals and units to accept certain beneficiaries based solely on the patient's diagnosis and not based on their individual needs and rehabilitation and functional requirements. And so while that's the case, we do not necessarily oppose bundling. In fact, we recognize the different silos of care that often lead to inefficient care in the post-acute care environment. And we favor well-developed bundling proposals that are based on sound evidence and are linked to quality measures and to risk-adjusted payments so that those savings are not achieved by essentially stinting on patient care. And with due respect to some of the things that I've heard this morning, we do believe that further study is needed in this area. This is a very complex area, and it impacts very vulnerable Medicare beneficiaries. In terms of the Bundling and Coordination Post-Acute Care Act of 2014, we believe that this is a model, bundling is a model, again, that we do not oppose, but we think that especially to protect vulnerable beneficiaries, there need to be some improvements. And we just quickly tick off a few of those. Number one, we have great concerns about the bundle being held by an acute care hospital or an insurance company. We believe that PAC providers, people that are in the post-acute setting who understand rehabilitation and know what the patient's needs are and what they will need in terms of services should be the bundle holder in those instances. There is a concept known as the continuing care hospital pilot, which is mandated by law that CMS implement, and inexplicably CMS has not yet moved forward with that pilot, and we encourage them to do so. A rehabilitation physician should be directing the care in a bundled payment system. Device exemptions should apply. You should not have prosthetics, orthotics, durable medical equipment that are of a customized nature included in the bundle, because we've got evidence based on the SNF PPS many years ago that those kinds of devices are simply not provided to beneficiaries under a bundled payment system. They're either delayed or they're not denied completely. And there are certain vulnerable patient populations, such as traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, and other conditions that we do not recommend bundling, at least in the initial phases of implementation. Risk adjustment and quality improvement are obviously the risk adjustment and quality measures are obviously the most important to make sure that people are not underserved under bundled systems. And the rest of the detail on that is in my testimony. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, the resounding consensus that at the heart of any payment reform, robust, meaningful quality measures must be available to assess the provider. What challenges are there in measuring these quality outcomes of Medicare beneficiaries who receive these post-acute care services, again, in various settings?
Thank you very much for the question. Well, I would say first that the quality metrics across the different settings, the primary areas of post-acute care are not uniform, and so it's very difficult to measure quality across different settings with different systems. I think that there's a lack of functional measures, but in particular quality of life measures. It's very important that after a post-acute care stay, it's not necessarily the range of motion that a person is able to achieve in their rehabilitation through their rehabilitation stay. It's whether that person can dress themselves again, or whether they can play golf, or whether they can go back to work if that's appropriate. It's returning to life roles, and that's something. Those kinds of measures. There are some data sets that measure those kinds of things, but that's where the consumer groups or the disability groups would like to see much more emphasis on measuring those kinds of things, of returning back to community life and living as independently as possible. And if you can't do that as a result of a particular post-acute care stay because you weren't sent to the proper or the more intense or the proper setting of care with that set of services that you really need to meet your individual and unique needs, then you're really not getting all you can out of the Medicare program, and that would be a real shame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we'll probably have some other follow-up questions to the panel. Thank you.